Resident Evil 4, both the main game and separate ways. Bro, when I tell you, it is one of the best experiences I've had in a long time, and easily the best horror game of the year until Alan Wake 2 drops. Oh my goodness. My words are not doing it justice, ladies and gentlemen. I am obsessed with Resident Evil 4. But because of the Separate Ways DLC ending specifically, fans are wondering, is RE5 Next in terms of remake? To answer that question, first I'm gonna put the warning out there. Spoilers alert for RE4 Separate Ways Remake ending, and a little bit of RE5, not too much. I'm not gonna go into major spoilers, but there you go. So in the ending of Separate Ways, they gave us a little more than we thought. Actually, it was a lot of Wesker, Albert Wesker, the man who hired Ada, the main characters of Separate Ways, as a contractor to get the job done in the village. The same village where Leon was on a mission by President himself to protect and help President's daughter escape. Then you also had a third storyline in there with Luis, the bioterrorism, the agent, Crosser. Like, there was so much going on. They handled it and tackled it perfectly. But in the end of Separate Ways, what they did here, they showed a lot of Albert Wesker. Why is it important, you might be wondering? Okay, it matters because Albert Wesker, spoilers alert, is the main antagonist of Resident Evil 5. Now, Resident Evil 5 delves deeper, focuses on Chris Redfield. We're not going to talk about her partner since it's a co-op game, which we're going to come to in just a second, but Chris Redfield versus Albert Wesker is your go-to storyline for Resident Evil 5. Now, pause right here. Why is this so important? This is important, ladies and gentlemen, because Resident Evil 9 is rumored to be, and I made a video on it, you can check it out, centered around Chris Redfield. Resident Evil 9 will end the Winters story that started in Resident Evil 7. Chris Redfield was heavily involved with the events of Winters' family. Both in 7 and 8, we've seen it through and through. So he's gonna complete that and end that storyline. So fans were hoping that Resident Evil 5 drops before Resident Evil 9, but that's not gonna happen. Jill was also a huge, massive part of Resident Evil 5. So that begs the question, is RE5 next? There's no official confirmation, but Capcom have been throwing these surveys where they were asking fans on what remake they would like to see next. There was, Resident Evil 5 was on the list, 6 was on the list, and I feel like it would be weird if they don't do it. If anything, the Separate Ways DLC ending just confirms that they are heavily going at it. In the end, you can see on the monitor, Africa was highly mentioned. Why is Africa important for Resident Evil? Well, because the entire game of Resident Evil 5 is Chris Redfield in Africa. Now, that itself draws a controversy because back then it drew a ton of controversy. You have, a white male going to Africa, killing all these, So, one would have to wonder, okay, if that drew controversy back then, we're in 2023, what's gonna happen here? But look, they'll make it work. Capcom will make it work. The new team there at Capcom, the ones that are handling Resident Evil, they'll handle it well. The real question is, what are they going to do about the gameplay? Because it was co-op, and it was a huge departure from the way they were doing Resident Evil. Because if you compare the original Resident Evil 4 with Resident Evil 5, there's a night and day difference between the way, because here, Resident Evil 2, 3, 4, 7, 8 mostly focuses on stealth, and very carefully, like, the way you handle the combat and do the gameplay is very, strategic, kinda, sorta. It's fairly satisfying too. But Resident Evil 5 is really gun-blazing, shooting waves of enemies because, they're infected and all that other stuff. I'm using infected as a very light word. And then you got Resident Evil 6, which was even... Okay, we're not going to talk about that. So I think they can find a balance, the middle ground for Resident Evil 5, where they can take the stuff that has worked so far. Because if you look at the history of Resident Evil 2, 3, 4, it just seems like that whatever they learned in Resident Evil 2 Remake, which was already fantastic, they doubled down in terms of gameplay, of course, in Resident Evil 3, and then made it even better. Both 2 and 3 combined, Resident Evil 4 is the results you get with that. So Resident Evil 5 Remake is 100% on the table. It is coming. It has been hinted at in terms of storyline. There's one more problem here. Code Veronica. Code Veronica sets up the scene, the stage for Resident Evil 5, and fans like myself not really been asking for a Code Veronica remake first, but I don't think Code Veronica is gonna happen. I feel like Resident Evil 5 remake is going to happen, but first there's gonna be Resident Evil 9, which is slated to drop in 2025, and then we're gonna move to Resident Evil 5. They can even go as far as to make a bundle, Resident Evil 5 and 9, or something like that. I don't know. There is no doubt in my mind after Separate Ways DLC that Resident Evil 5 is happening. The real question is, how are they gonna tackle it? Are they gonna improve and use what they've already learned from 2, 3, and 4 in terms of gameplay? Keep it going? Or are they gonna stay faithful to the original one? Keep it co-op, keep it gun-blazing action, kill wave after wave, less of a horror action adventure. If I look at Resident Evil 5, I don't call that horror, I call it a very heavy action packed using a horror tag. Let me know down in the comments below, how do you feel about this?